Hey folks, MasakoX here. I would like to point you all to my newly refreshed Patreon at patreon.com/MasakoX, just to make sure the channel can keep on chugging along. Thank you very much for your time, and let's get on to the story. We've recently wondered about the place of the angels in the divine project of Rimus. We even pondered if Saiyans were a freak accident, or something that was created with some foresight in mind. Today, let's talk about one of the more enigmatic species in the world of Dragon Ball. On one hand, it has been with us for years, with multiple members, although in the animated continuity, we have seen just one of them that was not connected to its most famous family. That's right, as hinted at the end of our previous discussions, let's look at that Freezer guy from the perspective of the gods. And obviously, it will be this topic, mostly Universe 7 stuff, so Shin, Beerus, King Kai, whatnot, because we don't really have an insight in the perspective from other realms. Like, I am pretty sure that Champa might have been aware of Frost's transgressions and dealings. He just didn't care, which also tells us something. Anyway, we know that King Cold and Frieza are considered to be mutants in general, though if we are meant to interpret them as unique individuals or completely separate class from their species, that's up for interpretation. In the Dragon Ball episode of Bardock Super Kanzenban from Psycho Jump circa March 2014, Toriyama answers a very direct question regarding Frieza and its Freezy Pop, about how many of Frieza's race are there. Are they quite thriving with a big population? Toriyama responds saying, Frieza is what you might call a mutated life form. Strictly speaking, Frieza's father is a mutant with an abnormally high battle power and, born from his father alone, still in strong possession of mutant traits, was Frieza. Accordingly, even saying Frieza's race, these two are the only ones who possess an abnormal level of battle power and cruelty. As noted by Herms, it is worded in such a way that it is unclear whether Toriyama means Frieza was born from only one parent or emphasizing that only Cold carried these traits. And that is kind of important, as it doesn't rule out the existence of the mother completely. Can you imagine Frieza with bobs? But at the same time, it is what of us assumed, and looking at their reliance on the biotechnology stuff, some of the fans, including Have and I, went with the cloning route to explain the relationship. Though, of course, this is merely some sort of headcanon and not something that was stated anywhere officially. As you can see, you can interpret a lot from all of this, and honestly, the idea of the line of King Cold existing purely because of Chilled's existence in the episode of Bardock, which, most of us would likely want to forget about, that Chilled was probably the best thing about the whole entity, the why it existed, at least because of the lore, and what he inspired, obviously, in his outrageous abridged version. Now, there is one more mention of Frieza's mutation much earlier in a Western version of Shonen Jump that actually had a monthly version of said magazine. It happened in a Q&A with Toriyama from the very first issue, January 2003. Once again, thanks to Kanzenshu for archiving these chestnuts. What is Frieza really? I mean, what type of species? How did he get so powerful? Why does he have an army when he can blow up the universe with the blink of an eye? This question coming from Joshua Dare in New York. Toriyama responding, there aren't many of them, but perhaps they are a new hybrid species that came into existence from an accidental spontaneous mutation in our grandfather's time. As for Frieza's men, he doesn't consider them an army so much as convenient followers. As you can see, the response to Joshua, it doesn't quite add up, as we are told that King Cold is also a mutant. This might be either due to the ideas evolving over time, despite what people think and what Toriyama used to say. He did not completely forget his ideas, and many of them did evolve over time. I mean, just look at the Glint. Or is this just some kind of slight mistranslation? Because if we talked about Frieza's birth, that could have been closer to reality, unless this is some kind of oversimplification. And if we were to take Toriyama's word for it, times of his own grandfather would be maybe around the 20s or 30s, which wouldn't put him that far away from the past. I don't think we should really think about this too hard though in regards to King Cold. I'd say he is at least 100 years old, or if not older. Now, there are two important links to modern lore that we have to discuss. Frieza's line about his father warning him about Majin Buu and Beerus. King Cold considered himself in his line the pinnacle of existence, both in power and in status. So it would have to be really hard for him to really dig down and admit that there were entities superior to him. It must have been so galling. Note that he didn't mention the Supreme Kais there though, who supposedly, in Shin's own words, could destroy them in merely one hit. He was either unaware of them or didn't consider them too much of a threat due to their general detached nature, not wanting to get involved. In our mind, there are only two options for Cold to really bother about the Destroyer and the Margin. Either he was warned by his own parents or predecessor, which would imply that the line didn't start with him and kinda goes along with it coming from the likes of Chilled, or he had to witness the initial rampage for himself. Beerus is easier to explain. He probably came to visit one day and toyed with the king, much like he toyed with everyone else. Maybe Cold was doing his dirty deeds before Frieza, and maybe, actually, part of him being tired of the job was having the cat breathing heavily down his neck, so maybe he decided to take some of the onus off of his own shoulders. A convenience, an accident, a lucky accident. Especially that Frieza was supposedly even more cruel than his father, something that was intentional in the way he was raised. That, though, leaves us with Cold being either a century or a couple of centuries old before he decided to step back, in case of the lineage option, or he's basically ancient and the first proper leader of the dynasty. Also, he never bothered to train, like his son. Thus he remained at relatively the same level of power throughout his existence. Or he was slacking in his later years, we don't know. Though the words that Toriyama used, especially the word spontaneous, can point both at some experimentation or a weird natural occurrence. We just don't know. Though the hybrid nature of the species is quite interesting and kind of forgotten in terms of the Freeza discussions that we've had over the years. Even if we did kind of forget that this was something used by the author to describe the emperors of the universe, but okay, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Now, when we have their status set straight, it is easier to see why Beerus saw them useful. They like destruction, well enough to blow planets on his behalf, and doing it well. And obviously we're able to, think about it when you think about it. This isn't much of a milestone. Pretty sure Cell Saga Chaozu could blow up a planet, by the way. Just imagine that. Tiny little Chinese vampire. Bye-bye. And since they wanted control, power and prestige, Beerus could trust that they wouldn't go too overboard. And hey, that also retroactively explains Frieza's initial desire for immortality. Perhaps he wasn't aware that this wouldn't help him against Hakai and the god of destruction himself. It's hard to say. I know that many people don't like the Planet Vegeta retcon, but it is what it is. I think Frieza was fortunate enough to end multiple birds with one stone and would like that gone anyway. Also, if we are going by the whole fate and prophecy chestnut, maybe one of Beerus's dreams kicked off the whole process of creating a chain of events that would end up shaping Goku and his lineage the way that it actually did. Basically, Beerus pressed the button to create the Super Saiyan God. Literal Deus Ex Machina. This might be a little bit of overthinking, obviously, but it is kind of fun. But now, look at the Supreme Kais. Like, come on. Frieza was and is pretty evil, no doubt about it. He was kinda good for his troops when they were away from him. Those that were the closest actually got the short end of the stick. But why those Supreme Kais hadn't done anything about him, something about him? After all, even if the Space Emperor did not destroy planets, he wiped out races, which is almost as bad. Like, Frieza's evil is so despicable because he is aware of what he is doing and he revels in that. Well, there are a few things that we should consider. First, how different the case of Majin Buu is. Like, obviously, the Majin was much more powerful than Frieza at the time of his rampage, but also was an outsider from the demon realm. Obviously, he was also quite unchecked himself, but could you really say that the Cold Dynasty was stable? I know, that the difference was one could be stopped with a wave of the hand of a Supreme Kai, but still, harm would already have been done before the Kais would actually go out of their way to make a decision and get involved or something like that. Buu could realistically wipe out the entire broad spectrum of life within Universe 7 because he was mostly motivated by urges. Freeza probably wouldn't go full nuclear on the cosmos. Probably not. And also because of Glyn sharing the home realm with Buu, they might have felt that it was kind of their responsibility, the attachments. Maybe their escape was what allowed Bibbidi and Buu to tag along with them, naturally just hijack and hitchhike. We don't know. These events happened at a kind of nervous moment for the Demon Realm, when Deborah was taking over, and the Glyn were doing their last runs to and from the multiverse. We don't really know. But there is one more thing, and I think this kind of reveals one of the bigger problems with the godly system and how its rules are followed. We see it with Goasu, and we see it with Shin within Daima, but they generally don't want to intervene and don't mind people suffering under tyrants. Seriously. He wasn't, Shin, all that bothered by his sister's previous actions, Dr. Anisu, considering her almost redeemed at the end of it, though she built one of the most ridiculously cruel tools of population control with the collars and the whole age-stealing thing. Yeah, that kind of checks out with what got Zamasu so pissed, and let's be clear, Zamasu got to the wrong conclusions, but he was onto something. Time and time we are shown that the Supreme Kais do not care, that the ships they are sailing have holes, the crew is starving, and nobody knows where they're going. As long as it isn't drowning or sinking, they're fine, it's absolutely gravy. And you know what's even more messed up? Than the likes of King Cold and Freeza? They were kind of convenient themselves, because those structures were basically governing themselves. No matter if they were wiping out a race from time to time or enslaving one, as long as you had an eye on them, you knew what was going down in the universe. Everything else was just really lowly developed like Earth. I think in their twisted logic, this could be a necessary evil. Yes, most of Universe 7 was under control of a galaxy-wide evil empire, but at least it was functioning and easy to follow, right? And then we touch upon the video about the Saiyans, where one little monkey person and his friends start to mess up the system, and slowly but surely disassemble it entirely, proving to gods themselves that stuff is not right. Obviously, this could be an extreme version of the universe will sort itself out, but still, you have to wonder, was it how Rymus planned it in the first place, or did he have any idea about what was going down at all? I mean, he made a multiverse. No one expected him to know if he was really the first one in the entire history of existence to do so. And let's not forget, we like to joke about the fact that King Kai, basically the godly equivalent of a middle manager person, was obscuring a lot of information from our Dragon team. But you know what? At least he was doing something and felt somewhat responsible to be of even just a little bit of assistance, which is kind of funny. Because it seems that the lower directional Kais, they are not prohibited from intervening. It's just that they don't have that much power in which to intervene. Very good system, Rymus. It clearly works. As for Universe 6, while only the anime mentions that Frost is the space pirate on top of being the ruler of said universe, we kind of had this general idea of him being less expansive than Freeza, less ambitious. If the animated version is anything to go by, he used his empire to trick people into believing in his own benevolence, while the manga doesn't even talk about him being particularly evil in the first place, and only spirals downwards after the tournament itself. Basically, Frost is just a con artist, whereas Freeza, he's the whole caboodle. His revealed disgrace, Frost, makes him being pursued by Hit. Also, the interesting thing is that both the manga and the anime are conflicted about which of the universes has the higher mortal level. If we go after the cartoon's turn of events, it's Universe 6 who's ahead, which, we have peacekeeping Saiyans and Frost's empire not nearly as present as Frieza's. Mortal levels just get messed up the longer you think about them. It's just such a weird metric. But at the end of the day, you see that part of it is obviously the Universe 6 and 7 problems, and the ones that are faring better do not seem to have emperors of any sort of race, be it Frieza or otherwise. Maybe they once had, but they dealt with it since then, so who knows? It is quite telling that the two highest universes that almost got spared from participation in the Tournament of Power do have very dedicated superhero teams that are very active, versus the legendary proactiveness of the Dragon team themselves. That is something worth thinking about, my friend. To sum it up, I think that part of the mismanagement of Universe 7 comes from the fact that the two spectrums of the divine did find the Emperors to be somewhat convenient. They could grow for years without anything to balance them out, and once they were gone, well, chaos would ensue, really. And who knows how it would have ended now that Black Frieza's preparing something. And neither our hero or the gods are really all that interested in putting a stop to it. Credit to Vegeta for actually being wary of all of this, by the way. And anyway, Frieza wasn't part of the system, but the gods treated them as if he was a god, but in mortal form. And considering that other universes do not seem to have this issue, we are going to take this one out of Rimus's arms. I think this is more of a local mismanagement sort of thing.